Do you ever feel like there are some environments that you just really struggle to get people to stop and talk to you? You feel like you're doing everything right, but the results just aren't there? Well, good news is today we're going to be exploring stopping strategy, how you can adapt your approach to get better results. So sit back, grab a notepad, and get ready to take your fundraising game to the next level. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jules, and today we're going to be continuing with my series on stopping. In the previous video, we looked at the 3 elements of effective stopping, and today we're going to be exploring the power of strategy, how your stopping strategy, or the lack thereof, is affecting your results. Now, in fairness, many of the concepts I'm going to discuss today apply to other areas of your fundraising practice, but today we're just going to stick to stopping, and I'll do some other videos on other areas of strategy. So I hope you're ready to take some notes. Let's go. So strategy is essential because while you don't have control over external factors, you do have control over the way you act and behave through decisions that you make. And so by taking more control of what you can not only improve your performance, create a much more purposeful and positive mindset, become a more ethical and honest fundraiser, as well as improve your skill set significantly. Now, I'm a firm believer in the power of taking personal responsibility. You will no doubt see this as a theme through a lot of my content because at the end of the day, life happens. Reality is what it is, and you can either fight it by complaining or trying to get it to fit the way that you think it should be and the way that things should unfold, or you can work with it. You can honor it, you can respect it, and you can embrace it. One path leads to stress, frustration, and anxiety, and the other to peace, joy, and success. The heart of strategy is taking the responsibility to adapt yourself, your style, your approach, perhaps even your demeanor to meet the needs of the environment you're working in, and more importantly, to meet the needs of the people that you find there. Now, I'm not talking about becoming something that you're not, becoming inauthentic, fake, and trying to be what you think other people want you to be. Now, what I'm talking about is being as authentically yourself as possible, while still understanding that you need to make some adjustments to the way that you present yourself and you work in order to get the best outcome. Now, we do this all the time. Take, for instance, when you go to an interview, right? You dress in a certain way, you act in a certain way, you speak in a certain way to get the best outcome. If you're going to a friend's wedding, you don't dress up in jogging bottoms and a hoodie. When you go and speak to your boss, you don't talk to them in the same way that you would with close friends. We do this all the time. We adapt ourselves and our approach to get the most positive outcome we can. Now, it's exactly the same for your fundraising and exactly the same for your stopping. So as an example, I was recently working with a fundraiser, let's call him Peter, and he was struggling to perform, particularly struggling to get people to stop and talk to him while working at a food festival. It's one of those food festivals, downtown, city center, road is closed off, we've got stalls, vendors, food trucks, lots of different types of people there, people who'd come for the festival, people who were just walking by, people on lunch breaks, people who were just walking down the road because that's the way they needed to go, and probably heaps of other people too. One could argue it was a pretty decent event with lots of potential. The vibe was cool, there was music in the air, quite a lot of people around, weather wasn't terrible. So why could Peter not perform? Why could he not get people to stop and engage with him? He was a pretty good fundraiser. He wasn't the best, wasn't the worst, but typically always had, no problem hitting his targets and doing a pretty good job. So I observed Peter working for a while and then went over to talk to him. And through that conversation, the answer became pretty clear. So one of the first questions that I asked Peter as we started this sort of coaching conversation was what he'd been trying through the day. What different things, different approaches, different strategies, different techniques or tools had he been using? What was working for him? What wasn't? And he looked at me a little bit confused and said, "What do you mean?" He said something along the lines of, trying different things. I've been doing what I always do. It serves me well. I typically do fine. It's just this event. It's too busy. There's lots of people around. They're too distracted. Lots of things to do. Music, sounds, all sorts of things. And people just don't want to stop and talk to me about this cause. You see, Peter typically worked at a different type of event and venue. His venues were usually slower and quieter. These were farmers markets, garden centers, leisure centers, gyms. He worked at some of these smaller shopping precincts, usually where there was, people coming to do one or two things. It was a fairly consistent demographic. It wasn't too busy. There wasn't too many distractions. And his style that he usually used worked quite well, and he was able to perform most of the time. Now, when it came to this event, it was a completely different ballgame, and he was using his same style, his same strategy, and it just wasn't working for him. And this led to him feeling demotivated, feeling perhaps a bit insecure, and perhaps then that led to him not taking any further steps to kind of really step outside of his comfort zone and be a bit more assertive. So through the rest of the coaching conversation, I explained to Peter some of the ideas behind changing his approach, changing his style, not being something he wasn't, but just adapting to that particular environment and the needs of the people. It was a little bit uncomfortable at first because these things were new to him and he wasn't used to approaching his work in the same way. But over just a little bit of time, he started to get rejuvenated with energy because he saw that actually he had a lot more control over his results, over his success than he thought he did. He tried out some of these new ideas that we discussed. Some worked, some didn't. But as the day progressed, he found out what worked best for him and he was able to perform and achieve over his targets for the day, ending the day as a real success. So I've seen this issue often. It commonly happens when fundraisers change medium. I don't know if you've ever tried a completely different medium, right? A street fundraiser doing door work, a door fundraiser doing street work, indoor fundraiser doing door, or, people changing mediums usually have a fairly hard time at first. Now, while it's still fundraising and the basics and the fundamentals are pretty much the same, the strategy, the approach needs to be somewhat different. But it also happens very commonly with people like Peter, who work in different types of venues and events. Now, I see it often go under the radar because these performers are usually seen as your sort of average performers. They do well in events and venues that suit their style, suit their strategy, suit their approach, and then they don't do very well when it doesn't. And what ends up happening is those bad performing days lower their averages, when high performers are really the people who are able to adapt their style, their strategy, their approach, keep themselves open-minded, different ways of working to remain consistent wherever they go. Now, it doesn't mean you're always going to perform well, but the chances of you doing well consistently, if you're adapting and changing and trying things to see what works, is very high. You might ask yourself how you can get started making some of these changes. So there are a number of attributes and characteristics that I often talk to. There's a whole bunch more, but I'll give you the main ones here. Now, I suggest you take some notes if you want to get this down so that when you're actually out there, you can think of your different spaces in these terms. But let's have a look at some of them. So the first one that I'll discuss is pace. Now, pace is the speed and the cadence of the foot traffic. Is it laid back, slow, chilled, relaxed, or is it faster paced, more energetic, a bit more upbeat? What is the cadence of people? Do people come in waves, or is there a nice steady trickle? Then you can also look at foot traffic. How many people are actually passing by? Do you have time to engage donors at a distance in a more meaningful way, or do you need to be a little bit more snappy and sharp with your requests to engage? Time is another one, right? How much time might potential donors have to spare? Can you adapt your request to engage and communicate that respective time? Take your time. Do you build more rapport? Do you have that space? Demographics is another big one. Now, there's lots of different demographic traits, but things like, how formal is that location? Is it a bit more conservative, formal, business-like, or is it a bit more liberal, chilled out, and relaxed? But again, demographic, there are heaps. There's age, there's race, there's all sorts of other demographics that might play into this. Space is another one. What's the space like that you're actually working? Is it very open and wide, or is it quite narrow? Where are the entrances? Where are the exits? Where are most people coming from? Where are you standing? Where are you positioning yourself? Where are your materials? If you have some facing, right? Do you have any banners or a podium? Where are those things facing, and how are you working with the space? And the last one I'll discuss is competition and distractions. What sort of competition is there for the donor's time, money, and attention? How many visual and auditory distractions are there? How assertive and energetic might you need to be with your words, your tone, and with your body language? Do you need to project yourself further, or can you be more laid back? Are there not that many distractions? Now, you're not going to know the perfect way to adapt your approach and your strategy. This process is one of trial and error. Now, if what you're doing isn't working for you, then try something different. I mean, isn't that the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing and expecting something different to happen. So try something new. Honestly, it is really quite fun to try different things. And over time, with practice, you will learn how to behave, how to act, how to approach different venues and different types of people. And this will only make you a stronger fundraiser in the long term. Now, I'll also say this isn't a silver bullet. This isn't going to revolutionize everything, but it certainly is a really important foundational skill, ability, and principle to follow, because it goes so much further than just your stopping, right? It applies to your pitching, it applies to how you ask, it applies to all areas of your fundraising. Think about what you're doing and try to meet the needs of the people. This is ultimately how we become better fundraisers, is that we're actually customizing what we're doing, making that conversation and that approach unique to each of those individuals. That's the sort of the magic of face-to-face, right? We get to have these unique conversations with each and every individual that we encounter, and that's really what makes us powerful at what we do. You know, next time you go out, try not dwell on the challenges and see them as dead ends. Try not participate in negative self-talk, but rather use that energy to move yourself forward. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you have, do share it with another fundraising friend. Share, like, all that stuff. Subscribe, that would be great. But more importantly, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts, your feelings, your feedback. If there's any particular issues you're struggling with, if there's a particular videos you want me to create, leave them in the comments below and I will try to get to those as soon as possible. Anyway, until next time, stay inspired and keep fundraising.